משמר הכבוד, עמוד נוח, עמוד חופשי. המשמר יעבור לדום. משמר דום. המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. כתף, צ'ק. משמר הכבוד, תזמורת צהל, במקום, רוך. שמאל, מין, שמאל. שמאל, מין, שמאל. שמאל, מין, שמאל. קדימה, צעד. שמאל, מין, שמאל. שמאל, מין, שמאל. שמאל, מין, שמאל. המשמר נימה נה. המשמר ישר שורותיו לימין עם רווחים. לימין שר. והנעל והפס. לחזית שוף. המשמר יציג את נשקו. צג, צ'ק. המשמר יעבור לנוח. מות, נוח.
גבירותיי ורבותיי, שלום וברוכים הבאים לטקס קבלת הפנים לנשיא ארצות הברית, מר ג'וזף R. ביידן ג'וניור. מטוסו של הנשיא נחת זה עתה, אבקשכם לשבת במקומותיכם ולכבות את מכשירי הטלפון. Ladies and gentlemen, shalom and welcome to the welcoming ceremony for the President of the United States, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden Jr. The plane of the President has just landed. We will kindly ask you to take your seat and turn off your cellular devices. אל רחבת הטקס נכנס יושב ראש הכנסת, חבר הכנסת מיקי לוי. The Speaker of the Knesset, Mr. Mickey Levy.
משמר יעבור לדום. משמר, דום. המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. חטף, צ'ק. המשמר ידגל את נשקו. דגל, צ'ק. המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. החטף, צ'ק. המשמר יציג את נשקו. הצג, צ'ק. משמר יעבור לנוח. מות, נוח.
אל רחבת הטקס נכנס ראש הממשלה החליפי, מר נפתלי בנט. The alternate Prime Minister, Mr. נפתלי בנט.
משמר יעבור לדום. משמר, דום. שמר יעבור לנוח, מות נוח. שמר יעבור לדום, שמר דום, שמר יעבור לנוח, מות נוח.
Hello and welcome to ILTV's live coverage of Biden's first official visit, the White House first official delegation to Israel since Biden really came into office in January 2021. I'm here with Gideon Israel. Thank you so much for joining us, political analyst and expert on U.S.-Israel diplomacy. And Gideon, how are you?
Good, thank God. Happy to be here.
All right, yeah, no, this is a very momentous occasion. Of course, Biden taking a year and a half to arrive in Israel. He's got a number of goals. Some would say they're pretty lofty, but we'll get to that in just a moment. For now, Biden has just arrived. The plane is landing on the tarmac, and as soon as he gets out, the red carpet is there, and we're going to see speeches. He's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Lapid and a number of other officials, and this is, of course, before heading off to the Palestinian Authority and then eventually to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on Friday. So, Gideon, let's talk a little bit about some of these goals before we see.
By the way, if I could just interject,
please.
President Trump came to Israel pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So when we think about Biden taking a year and a half to come to Israel, it's really not that long. I think Barack Obama, President Obama, only came to Israel, I think, in the beginning of his second term. And I think President Bush came to Israel only after 7 years in office. So it's not necessarily a precedent of coming immediately to Israel.
Right.
By the
So,
way,
so you don't think there's any sort of like slight or anything like that? It's just, there were other things to deal with that prevented this trip.
It's not it's not a priority to come to Israel first. I think one thing that was mentioned is that from Israel he's traveling to Saudi Arabia, and that's the first flight from Israel to Saudi Arabia. However, actually, when President Trump came to Israel, he actually flew directly from Saudi Arabia to Israel.
Interesting.
So he already came on that.
Well, and was that
route.
like an official thing, or was that kind of hush hush at the time?
No. Trump, I think his trip was first to Rome, Christianity, then to Saudi Arabia, Islam, and then to Jerusalem, Judaism. So I think that was kind of the idea of the trip there.
Well, and so again, if we're talking about, and here again we see on the screen interim Prime Minister Yair Lapid and former Prime Minister now Naftali Bennett standing on the red carpet and waiting for Biden to deplane. Again, if we're talking about some of these goals for Biden's trip to Israel and then to the Palestinian Authority, then to Saudi Arabia, what do you make of them? Maybe kind of give us the rundown on some of the bigger ones, the priorities.
Well, what we know from the trip is that he has very short meetings with Prime Minister. He's actually not called interim Prime Minister. I've seen it. It's called caretaker Prime Minister or something. So it's how you call what he exactly is. But he's only meeting with Lapid for like I think half an hour. He's only meeting with Bibi Netanyahu for 15 minutes. So it's I would say that's very abnormal to travel so far for such short meetings. I think when just to sort of refresh my memory, I was looking back at what President Obama did when he was here. I think he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu for like over 5 hours in the time he was here. So what we know is that they're going to reaffirm the strong relationship with Israel. There's some type of Jerusalem declaration, but it doesn't seem very substantive. It seems to say things that already are, whether it be that they're going to follow through with the aid. I mean, you can't imagine that they would not. So from the Israeli side, maybe it's a lot of optics. It obviously feels good for Israel when the United States president comes to visit us. From the side of the Palestinians, the fact that he's going to the hospital in East Jerusalem is and the U.S. rejected that Israeli officials should go with them. It's kind of undermining Israel and also reflecting sort of a different kind of outlook that the Democrats have as opposed to 10 years ago, which is first of all, they're going to Augusta Victoria, so it's kind of to sort of affirm that the Palestinians have some type of rights in East Jerusalem, rights to a state, rights to a capital. But today, the way the line that the Democratic Party is pushing, or the leading voices, is that the Palestinians deserve a state not because it's in Israel's security interest, which is what it used to be 10, 15 years ago. But that today that the Palestinians have an independent right to a state, irrelevant of what Israel does or not, or irrelevant whether it's good for Israel or not.
Well, and I think many Israelis would agree to a Palestinian self-determination. Maybe not across the board, of course.
I don't know. I think I think if you talk to most Israelis and say there's going to be a Palestinian state and it's going to be another terrorist state. Right. Oh, I'm
sorry. Now we see President Biden standing at the top of Air Force One.
I don't think that's the president.
Or is that not? That's not Biden. Never mind.
It's usually usually what happens is when the president arrives, so you have a lot of staff that come out from a lower door, in the back of the plane. Everybody gets out, and usually, takes the president, something like it could take him 5 to 10 minutes to come out. It's, that his staff should be already on the tarmac, and everybody.
All right. Well,
but what I was saying is that I don't think that. I think for most Israelis, if you would say to them, "Listen, there's going to be a Palestinian state, and it's going to be a terrorist state. Are you for it?" They would say, "Absolutely not."
If you frame it that way, of course. And that brings me to some of the questions that I really have for you about this, because of course, one of Biden's stated goals, and Ambassador Nides also touched on this, is that the United States is going to reaffirm its position on a two-state solution and support for two-state negotiations. But given the state of not just Israeli politics, in that we don't really have a real government at this moment, but also the Palestinian political scene, that Abbas is aging and arguably doesn't have the power to maintain such agreements. How do you see that really progressing? Is that just lip service?
Well, I don't know if there's going to be any progression, but that's exactly the point. Like you said, Abbas is progressing. Can he even move this along? But still, the Americans are saying no. The Biden administration is saying no. We're going to move it along because the goal is a Palestinian state, because in the eyes of the Biden administration, they deserve a state, as opposed to saying let's solve a security related problem. I mean, one of the things.
Again, I mean, even if we go back to the old ideology for Israel's security reasons, again, if you frame it in the way of, do you want a terror state on your border? Of course, nobody is for that in Israel. But the idea of ending the occupation, I think most Israelis would agree that they don't have an interest in maintaining that. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of money.
It's important to remember that there really is no occupation. What if you want to say that the Palestinians used to be under Israeli law or under Israeli control? They're not. You have Area A, that's under Palestinian Authority,
right.
Civil and security. Area B is under Palestinian civilian control. So there really is a separation. There's no occupation. Gaza is by themselves. So
but it's not a 100% sovereign state.
But if I could just just want to add a point. What this kind of reminds me of, especially with the Israeli elections in another few months, and we don't know what's going to be. It kind of reminds me of when at the end of the Clinton administration, so you had Clinton and Barack and Arafat meeting. I think it was in Taba, basically a month and a half before Clinton's about to leave office. And with Clinton leaving office, and even if they could have reached some type of peace deal, who would secure? You wouldn't have a president who was committed necessarily to the peace deal. So how could you rush such in a crucial thing? When you don't have all your ducks in line. So it kind of reminds me of the same situation. We don't know who's going to be the next prime minister, and the support that Biden has at home is not strong at all. So you have a weak president we're not an uncertain political future in Israel, especially in the next few months. So to sort of even try to push that type of thing is.
So similarly, one of the stated goals is to pressure Israel into reopening the Palestinian consulate in Jerusalem. Of course, we know that Interior Minister Ayala Shaked, Justice Minister Saad, they'd have to, and various other authorities, they would have to sign off on that. They've made themselves fairly clear that they have no intentions to do that. Why are they still pressing this? Is this who are they trying to impress? Really, the United States on the Palestinian side, because the Palestinians themselves don't seem to be very excited or to have very high hopes for some of these statements.
I think the way they're getting around it is that they're going to open up some type of Palestinian affairs division within the embassy that'll serve specifically Palestinians. Mm-hmm. So they get around it and don't necessarily have to open the consulate. But like I said, it's not that the Palestinians are a special interest for the United States or even an important interest for the United States. Mm-hmm. But it's this line of that's being led in the Democratic Party by the leading voices, saying that we want a Palestinian state because for human rights reasons, for self-determination reasons, not connected with a certain security problem, and that's.
All right. Well, so again, we're waiting really on President Biden to deplane. The prime ministers are standing at the foot of the plane. They're waiting. Here we see them now, and President Herzog's there with them. They're waiting for Biden to deboard and to greet him. And if we move now really briefly to Israeli politics, a lot of people have been looking at Prime Ministers Lapid and Bennett, saying that this meeting is very surface level. And as you said, he's only going to be meeting, at least Lapid and Biden are only going to be meeting for about a half hour. Is this how does this play politically in Israel when given those circumstances?
Well, I think for a lot of people, for a lot of Israelis, there's just an excitement to see the President of the United States, to see Air Force One, to see the whole, grandeur that he comes with. I don't think so many people in Israel are focusing on whether they're going to meet for 15 minutes or half an hour. I think they're just focusing on that the American president is here. I think that there are people, obviously, on the right, and many in the right wing who are worried. Is this visit going to undermine Israel? Vis-a-vis the Palestinians and so forth. Also, we haven't even touched on Iran, which is another thing. Which is there seems to there's been statements by the American negotiators that they're not close to a deal, but we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And are they saying that to sort of calm those who are opposed, and then they'll reach some type of deal? Because it seems that the Biden administration is pretty intent on reaching a deal.
Well, yeah, and the White House stated that they want to create a U.S.-Israel partnership, on a strategic partnership on addressing the threat from Iran. But it seems that Israel and the United States very publicly have a very big difference, a gulf of difference of opinions on how to deal with that threat. So what exactly does this strategic partnership entail?
Right. So I think it's important to say I think Israel is I think Israel's in line with the Republican Party in terms of how to deal with the Iranian threat, but certainly not.
Go back to sanctions. Forget the JCPOA.
Even if there is a JCPOA,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but here we have Biden. He's deplaning right now, taking a moment to get some photographs. And heading down and meeting with Prime Ministers Lapid, walking down the road, shaking hands.
No, actually, that's the thing. They're not shaking hands because they're worried about Corona. I don't. That seems, I think from other visits that President Biden has made, I don't think I've seen him do the fist thing.
Yeah, giving some fist bumps. I wonder how much that actually limits transmission. There are no masks, and you're still touching hands and standing quite close.
Yeah. So, and also there's when President Trump came, you had the whole cabinet lined up on the tarmac, shaking hands. Here, you only have the prime minister and the caretaker prime minister and the alternate prime minister and the president. Right. Very small group to greet the president and. That's Ambassador Nides.
Ambassador Nides. He spent a moment there with former Prime Minister Bennett. That seemed very friendly. It was a nice greeting.
Well, I mean, according to Bennett, they became friends when Bennett was at his meeting with President Biden in Washington.
Well, and in a moment, of course, we'll then
That's the National Security Advisor, Ayal Hulata. Hulta?
Yeah. And then, I understand that they'll be giving some addresses to the public in just a moment. Of course, they come down and address everybody from the red carpet. So we'll go to that live in a moment.
But as you see, Biden and he's very personable, personable with people, whether he knows them or doesn't know them. So it's not surprising that he's taking a few moments to talk to each person. And
absolutely. So as we're watching this, what's going through your mind. What are maybe some of the pressures on Biden ahead of this meeting from the home front? I know we talked a little bit about the Democrats versus the Republicans and how they view this trip and the position on Israel and Iran.
The truth is, I think the main pressure on Biden is actually not on this stop of the trip. I think the main pressure is when he goes to Saudi Arabia, where he will request and maybe more than request, use the pressure the Saudis to produce whatever, however, to increase their production of oil to somewhat, bring the prices down, which is the biggest threat to the Democrats retaining control of the House and the Senate, in the midterms.
Yeah. Do you think that they'll have real success on that front, given that one of the primary concerns and interests from Saudi Arabia is to, again, counter that threat from Iran. And it seems like there's a lot of tension, not just between how Israel and the United States address that issue, but also how Saudi Arabia and the United States address that.
Right. There's and I mean, not only that, but when in an op-ed that Joe Biden wrote before coming to the region, he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post saying why I'm going to Saudi Arabia, and in that he again brings up the human rights issue and the Jamal Khashoggi killing.
Yeah, he had some very serious, strong words for Saudi Arabia not long ago.
So you wonder, how much can you slight the Saudis in public and then expect them to help out on the oil front. So it would be definitely interesting to be in that meeting behind closed doors and to hear Mohammed bin Salman's reaction to all that Biden's been saying about them.
Absolutely. That would be a very, very interesting thing to be a fly on the wall there. They're standing for the national anthem. We've seen videos of the Israeli orchestra preparing all day yesterday with actors in place of the delegation, which is very interesting to watch.
Right. Also, originally, I think President Biden was supposed to visit Palmachim Air Force Base, and there was something was supposed to happen there, but that was canceled. And there's going to be this small ceremony, which is not supposed to be long, and then he will be going to Jerusalem to his hotel, and I think until the evening. Or
Well, and I know that they have. Yeah, I know that he's also supposed to visit the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial.
Oh, right.
And the opening of the Maccabiah games.
Right,
well.
right. Which obviously there's an importance to remembering history and commemorating the Holocaust and so forth, and doing all that needs to be done to make sure that it never happens again. But when Yad Vashem becomes a central part of the trip, or one of the first places you visit, it's almost like that the legitimacy, for
you think it weakens the impact of the museum?
No. It has nothing to do with it. In terms of when Yad Vashem sort of becomes the place that becomes a central part of the visit. It's almost like the reason that Israel has a country is only because of the Holocaust. It is. I would like for diplomats and presidents and prime ministers to actually visit some of the sites of Israel's heroic victories. In their many wars. Which I think sends a much stronger message than only visiting Yad Vashem.
Well, I think Jerusalem in and of itself is a site similar to that, in that same vein, with the Western Wall and.
But that's the thing, they don't go to the Western Wall. President
Trump went to the wall.
President Trump was the first one. Actually, before President Trump,
he was the first to go to the wall.
He was the first president. Prior to that, actually, you had President George H.W. Bush, when he was vice president. He actually visited the Western Wall. But President Trump was the first one.
Right. Things were quieting down on the tarmac. I think very soon, again, we're going to have statements from various officials, including Biden and Lapid, and we'll go live to those statements. Seems we still have another address. It's hard to tell exactly, what the process is.
And in the background, you hear the song being played, which is Machar, which is called Tomorrow, which is a song played often in the army, which kind of at army ceremonies, which kind of represents which discusses Israel's aspiration for peace, and that one day there won't be a need for an army and so forth. So that's what's playing in the background.
Oh, it's beautiful. Didn't know that. Here, still walking to the hangar. It looks like.
Also, if I'm not mistaken, on other foreign trips, I think the president has come with his wife. So it's interesting if he's here alone, without his wife.
This is as we know, it's a very brief trip. As we've spoken, and here.
Well, it's not that it's so brief. It's that the actual content, the actual time. I mean,
Sure.
He has, I think, the President Biden has something like 15 hours, from when he goes to his hotel tonight until his first meeting in the morning. So it's light on content, which is what is so surprising. Although, for another aspect, it's not so surprising because some of the.
Right. Here we're going to Israeli President Isaac Herzog now.
Welcome to Israel, our brother Joseph. Baruch haba liYisrael, Achinu Yosef. The people of Israel welcome you to the Holy Land with open arms and joyous hearts, as Joseph, son of Jacob, who sought out his brothers. Here, Mr. President, you are truly amongst family. Like the biblical Joseph, you are both a visionary and a leader. committed to advancing the United States of America, the Middle East, the world at large, and the State of Israel. This historic visit reflects the deep partnership our nations share, a partnership rooted in our shared commitment to democracy, justice and freedom, tolerance, security, and peace. The State of Israel, in which you have just arrived, is a successful, innovative nation which contributes to Tikkun Olam, healing the world, through science and medicine, water and food technology, climate innovation, and so much more. Mr. President, you have been a true friend, Yedid Emet, and staunch supporter of Israel and the Jewish people, of our security and well-being your entire life. In this visit, you will discuss the security challenges emanating directly from Iran and its proxies, threatening Israel and its neighbors and endangering our region. Your first trip here in 1973 was just a few weeks before a terrible war broke out. Today, winds of peace are blowing from North Africa across the Mediterranean to the Gulf. This trip, Mr. President, is your journey of peace from Israel to Saudi Arabia, from the Holy Land to the Hijaz. I hope and pray it will help advance a regional vision of prosperity, integration, peace and security for our entire region. So, dear friend, Baruch haba, welcome to Israel and welcome home.
שמר יעבור לדום, משמר דום, שמר יעבור לנוח, מות נוח.
דבר ראש ממשלת ישראל, מר יאיר לפיד. The Prime
All right,
Minister
so we
of
just
Israel,
heard
Yair
some
Lapid,
of
will
Herzog's
deliver
statements,
his
and now
welcoming
we're going, it
remarks.
looks like, to Yair Lapid,
Mr.
the
President,
Prime Minister of Israel.
this is both
his statements live.
a historic visit and a deeply personal one. It is historic because it expresses the unbreakable bond between our countries, our commitment to shared values, democracy, freedom, and the right of the Jewish people to a state of their own. And it is a very personal visit because your relationship with Israel has always been very personal. You once defined yourself as a Zionist. You said that you don't have to be a Jew in order to be a Zionist. And you were right. And in your case, a great Zionist and one of the best friends Israel has ever known. You have not been here for a few years, so in the next couple of days, you will see how Israel has grown and developed. You will see the strength and smartness of the Israeli army, the creativity of the startup nation, the diversity of the Israeli society. Israel is a country that brings together the past, the present, and the future. Just moments ago, your plane, Air Force One, flew over where King Saul searched for his father's donkeys, above King David's rooftop, above the palm tree that Deborah, the prophet, sat under. You also flew over a world-leading high-tech industry, over agriculture that is helping improve food security around the globe, above universities and research institutes where Israeli scientists, including Nobel Prize winners, are leading groundbreaking research. During your visit, we will discuss matters of national security. We will discuss building a new security and economy architecture with the nations of the Middle East, following the Abraham Accords and the achievements of the Negev Summit. And we will discuss the need to renew a strong global coalition that will stop the Iranian nuclear program. There will be time for all of that. Right now, we are simply happy to see you, Mr. President. The simple, genuine joy brought by seeing a good friend once again. Mr. President, Baruch haba, welcome to Israel.
משמר יעבור לדום, משמר דום. משמר יעבור לנוח, מות נוח.
Strong statements from Prime Minister Yair Lapid speaking about Israel's partnership and goals for this meeting, but also, of course, just expressing joy for Biden's visit. And now we are heading live to President Biden and his address.
Mr. Prime Minister Lapid, it's an honor to once again stand with friends and visit the independent Jewish state of Israel. President Nixon was the first American president to visit Israel in 1974. My first visit was, as you mentioned, as a young United States Senator from Delaware in 1973, just a few weeks before the Yom Kippur War. I had the privilege of spending time with Prime Minister Golda Meir. I'll never forget, I was sitting next to a gentleman on my right when there were AIDS. His name was Rabin. I look back on it all now, and I realized that I had the great honor of living part of the great history of this great, and I did say, and I say again, you need not be a Jew to be a Zionist. The fact is that since then I've known every single prime minister, and it's been an honor. Formed strong working relations with each of them. And now, this is my 10th visit. Every chance to return to this great country, where the ancient roots of the Jewish people date back to biblical times, is a blessing. Because the connection between the Israeli people and the American people is bone deep. It's bone deep. Generation after generation, that connection grows. We invest in each other. We dream together. We're part of what has always been the objective we both had. I've been part of that as a senator, as a vice president, and quite frankly, before that, having been raised by a righteous Christian, who we had dinner at our table every night before he went back to work. And it was a place where we had conversation and incidentally ate. And I remember he taught us all about what happened in the Holocaust. Why weren't the tracks bombed? Why did we not? Why? And he imbued in us a sense of obligation that we all have. And now as president, I'm proud to say that our relationship with the State of Israel is deeper and stronger, in my view, than it's ever been. And with this visit, we're strengthening our connections even further. We have reaffirmed the unshakable commitment of the United States to Israel's security, including partnering with Israel on the most cutting-edge defense systems in the world. From here, I'm going straight to a briefing on Israeli missiles and rocket defense capabilities, including the U.S. support for the Iron Dome and Israel's new laser-enabled system called the Iron Beam. We're going to deepen our connections in science and innovation and work to address global challenges through the new strategic high-level dialogue on technology. We'll continue to advance Israel's integration into the region, expand emerging forums and engagement like the new I2U2 summit, which will bring Israel, the United States, the UAE together, and India as well, to deepen our economic cooperation between the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific. Greater peace, greater stability, greater connection. It's critical, if I might add, for all the people of the region, which is why we'll discuss my continued support, even though I know it's not in the near term, a two-state solution. That remains, in my view, the best way to ensure the future of equal measure of freedom, prosperity, and democracy for Israelis and Palestinians alike. We're going to celebrate the ending of people-to-people connection and the enduring connection that binds our nations together, commemorate the history that we must never allow to repeat itself. Later today, I will once more return to the hallowed ground of Yad Vashem to honor 6 million Jewish lives were stolen in the genocide and continue, which we must do every day, continue to bear witness. To keep alive the truth and honor of the Holocaust, horror of the Holocaust, honor those we lost so that we never, ever forget that lesson. You know, and to continue our shared, unending work to fight the poison of anti-Semitism wherever it rises its ugly head. Wherever we find it in the world, we make real on the promise of never again by taking it on. We have a full agenda over the next 2 days because the relationship between Israel and the United States covers every issue that matters to our mutual futures. We're united in our shared values and our shared vision. I'm looking forward to our time together over the next few days. May Israel and the United States continue to grow and prosper together for the benefit of the entire world. And I mean that, for the benefit of the entire world. Thank you, and God bless you all.
משמר יעבור לדום, משמר דום. משמר יעבור לנוח, מות נוח.
All right, so very amazing address from President Biden talking about the reaffirmed support, as we knew. He'd say reaffirmed support for Israel, for connections, for Zionism. And I think that was actually a very strong point, was, you know, addressing anti-Semitism, but also that you need not be a Jew to be a Zionist. I think that's maybe something that is confusing or confused in the rhetoric in the West today, actually, that Zionism is equated with Nazism and all sorts of terrible things.
Well, with a certain part of the population, there's another part of the population that sees Israel as an emblem for a strong patriotic state with borders and so forth. But as it's very nice that he said it. You don't need to be a Jew to be a Zionist. I think many in the United States would agree with that.
Yeah, I would hope so. Something else that struck me, though, is, of course, he talked about the continued technological innovations and partnerships between Israel and the United States, support for the Iron Dome and for the Iron Beam, which is an incredible new laser missile defense system. But speaking of technological diplomacy, do you think what do you think the limits are to that? Because of course there are some technologies that Israel can leverage to expand its peace, like through the Abraham Accords. But there's maybe a limit to what Israel is willing to share. No.
Well, I think it's interesting that in 1993 you had the head of the Israel Air Force, I think it was Herzog, who was very worried about doing joint exercises, joint air exercises with America, because he was worried that some of Israel's secrets in terms of how they maneuver in the air would come out. So I guess there will always be things that Israel doesn't want to share, but I think as the relationship gets closer and closer, as it has over the years, there's more things that it is willing to share. So I don't necessarily know what technology they're talking about now, but there's always room for more things.
So and of course we know that there were issues with that, of course, like under the Trump doctrine of using economics for peace. The Palestinians and the Saudis ultimately were not swayed by that ideology of coming of normalizing for the sake of economic gains. Do you think that maybe something has changed in the years since then, seeing the success of the Abraham Accords for the countries that did sign on?
Well, I think under the Trump administration, the economic, what you want to call it, economic diplomacy, economic pressure, the economic power of the United States was put to use. That's something that Trump said all the time, that we have such economic leverage over many countries, so let's use it. If the Palestinians will be swayed by economic diplomacy or economic measures, probably not. They have had their stance and towards Israel, and it hasn't changed.
Do you think that the path forward towards peace, from an economic or technological marketplace standpoint, is best leveraged by governments or by a free market and open market? Because we know, for example, with the United Arab Emirates, Israelis and Israeli businesses on a private level had been working with Emiratis for years before the Abraham Accords were ever signed.
So I think with the Emiratis, I think they realized how much they had to gain, from cooperation with Israel, be it private to private sector or even government to government. But I think they realized how much they had to gain and how much they could gain, and therefore they wanted to move forward. I don't think the Palestinians are at that place yet. While they would love to receive all the benefits of partnerships with Israel, but they're not at the point where they say this is a great idea and let's move forward to some type of peace because of it. They're just not there. Their leadership isn't there. Their leadership isn't there. And the minute their leadership would take that approach, they would be replaced by a new leadership. So, so obviously, person to person connections, Israelis and Palestinians, that's great. But the Palestinians don't really want to change their stance towards Israel. So it doesn't matter whether it be economic or whatever type of diplomacy.
And just keeping with some of the economic questions, I know that Economy Minister Lieberman spoke about creating this pan-Middle Eastern marketplace, including trains and highways that connect Israel to Jordan, to the UAE, to Bahrain, and to Saudi Arabia. How close are we to beginning steps like that, or beginning an economy like that, or have we already taken many of those steps, or do you think that there's still heavy pushback against it?
Heavy pushback from who?
That's what I'm asking.
I think we see that the Gulf countries, those that have already signed peace agreements with Israel, I think they want to move full force forward. I forget which one of the leaders, or maybe it was the foreign ministers of one of the countries. He said that the peace, the agreements that they signed with Israel, and the fact that they want to move forward in terms of cooperation is not dependent on one specific issue. Meaning, I think he was hinting that even if things don't move forward with the Palestinians, that's not what's going to hold back the cooperation. So I think they realize in the Gulf, they realize the benefit that there can be, and we already see how many flights are there from Tel Aviv to Dubai every week. There's 6, 7, 8, 9. There's people are already flying back and forth. It's becoming a vacation spot, so it's moving full force ahead.
All right, and then we actually saw very recently an expose, I believe it was by the Wall Street Journal. They were quoting Bahraini officials that Israel and Mossad and Shin Bet officials were actually sharing drones and drone technology with them. Is that kind of another step towards this market or this shared economy, or like changes in the Middle East?
Well, it's difficult to say, though. I think when Netanyahu signed the peace accords with the Gulf countries, I think you had security officials saying, we've already been visiting there. Israeli security officials, whether it be in the Mossad or others, saying we've already been visiting there for 10, 15 years. So there might have already been for a long time a type of security cooperation, even if it was under the radar. This might be above the radar, but we'll have to see.
All right. So speaking of Netanyahu, we know that Biden is set to meet with now opposition leader and former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I'm sure that their relationship is kind of a mix of different things. Obviously, there was tensions between the Obama administration and Netanyahu, and we're not really, but also a lot of positive gains and cooperation between the two administrations. Do you think that the current administration in the United States and in Israel has changed things? Do you think that that the Biden administration has any sort of vested interest in maybe even keeping the Bennett-Lapid government, or the Lapid government in office to any degree. I mean, there was the V-15 scandal, for example, in 2015, where it came out that there was funding to oust Netanyahu.
Well, I think it's also not the first time the Americans have had an interest in keeping a left-wing government in Israel, in power. I think also during the Clinton administration, I think it was their interest that Perez win against Netanyahu, I think in the 1996 elections. So I think obviously Lapid sees himself more aligned with the Democratic Party, and he's made those strides towards the Democratic Party, and he's, while he might have not said outright, but that's where he is. That's where his political, that's his outlook. So certainly for Biden, it'll be a lot easier to deal with a Lapid-Bennett government than a Netanyahu government.
I mean, but there have been a lot of changes on the ground. Of course, this is the Perez government and the Lapid government are very different in many respects. How would you maybe see that relationship changed in that way?
Well, I think the Perez and Lapid government were both looking to move forward to a two-state solution. I think
they kind of define the two-state solution, I think, a little bit differently, though. I know Lapid, for example, says completely demilitarized and under Israeli. I
mean, he can listen. They can they can say they can use a lot of fluffy words, and obviously we're in election season, and as it is in Israel. Whereas in America, you kind of take a position when you're a candidate. In Israel, you try to be as ambiguous as possible, so you can get a little bit from the right, a little bit from the center, a little bit from the left. But I think that for the Biden administration, Netanyahu has said that he will combat America if it moves toward combat in the diplomatic arena, if it tries to return to the JCPOA, where we see that. From the Lapid government or from before Bennett, they talked about doing things quietly behind the scenes, and I think America would much rather have a government like that than have one that's combating them diplomatically all over the world. So it's definitely President Biden has definitely an interest that while he's in office there should be a Bennett Lapid government or whatever might come after the elections, that another variety of that.
So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Of course, following these meetings, and then fast forward a couple months to Israel's elections, we see here on the screen, of course, the Israeli Iron Dome battery. We know that, of course, the Biden delegation is taking a tour, and we saw them a moment ago. It looked like heading off towards Jerusalem.
And there was something interesting also when President Obama came, I think in 2014. So there was also a exhibition of the Iron Dome on the tarmac at the airport, and you had kind of an odd situation for the United States Secret Security when Amir Peretz kind of ran after Obama to kind of tell him that, like, I'm the one who who put the Iron Dome, move the project forward. And here is this Israeli minister who's kind of running towards the American president, and they weren't exactly sure what to do. So that's
sort of something that's lost in translation between the cultures, because I think here in Israel it wouldn't faze many people that some guy is running after the ministers. I mean, you see that in the Knesset every day.
So the distance between the citizen and a minister, as opposed to the citizen and the president of the United States, is much different, much greater in America.
Right.
But this this looking at the Iron Dome or the Iron Beam, it's great optics. It makes everybody feel good. America and Israel working together. Mm-hmm. So it's. Could call it an easy win, to start the trip, and starts the trip on the right foot for both sides.
So okay, and we know that of course a lot of people are watching this live, and thank you everybody who's stayed with us until now. Thank you for continuing to watch and for joining us at the moment. So Gideon, again, what do you think are the highest hopes? Because presidents, they make a lot of lofty goals in the Middle East, and we talked a lot about how some of those goals are a little bit more feasible than others. What are the absolute top priorities for the Biden delegation in the Middle East?
Probably that who's ever watching and whoever cares about the U.S.-Israel relationship should feel that the Biden administration has reaffirmed its commitment to the United States-Israel partnership or alliance, and that there's a joint commitment to actually take active steps to stop Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon. Whether there's actually anything behind that, it's another question. But that's probably what the Biden delegation would love for, at least people who care about the U.S.-Israel relationship to see. Now, there's also the Palestinian side, and for those, for you want to call it the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, even though that's most of the Democratic Party. So for those who want to see, the Palestinian rights to a state reaffirmed and the two-state solution reaffirmed, and the renewing or rejuvenating the relationship with the Palestinians. So certainly, that branch will be, happy to see, a successful visit to this hospital in East Jerusalem, whatever that means, and then his meeting with Mahmoud Abbas in Beit Lechem after that. So those are, I think, those are the two goals, and I think you have a constituency that the Biden administration hopes to play to for each of those goals, and then of course you have the trip to Saudi Arabia, which it cannot be, Americans, Israel, while for many Americans Israel is important, Israel is an important issue, but at the end of the day, the economy is what's important, and if people are, paying, $5 for a gallon of gas, that's what's going to decide the election. So it can't be, underestimated how important that trip to Saudi Arabia is, and will Saudi Arabia or the Gulf countries increase oil production? And even if they do increase oil production, there have been analysts that say it won't make that much of a difference.
I mean, there are those, especially on the right in the United States, who have been pressuring and saying, that the United States needs to open up production at home and be more self-reliant to begin with, and that going to Saudi Arabia or wherever else is not the answer to begin with, is a non-starter anyway.
Right. There are many who were saying, look at where, from the conservatives and the Republicans, saying, look at where we were under the Trump administration, and look at where we are now. We weren't begging anybody to produce more oil, or we were energy independent and so forth. So it's obviously, and I think and former Ambassador Friedman mentioned on some show yesterday that it would be unfortunate. Kind of looks as if the President Biden is going to Saudi Arabia hat in hand. I think those were his words. Begging that they should produce more oil. So it's obviously unfortunate for Republicans and those who wish to see the United States more energy independent and keep their energy independence.
So speaking of kind of attitudes towards the leadership, we know that in Israel there was a poll that was recently published, and they talked about how the majority of Israelis liked Trump more based on his policies, in terms of policies towards Israel, but they trust Biden more to be more consistent and less dangerous, I think was the terminology that was used in the poll. How do you react to that?
I actually did not. I didn't hear about that poll.
I believe it was a Pew Research poll, actually.
The Pew that they tested attitudes in Israel.
I believe so.
Well, I mean, I think for most Israelis, they felt that Trump, understood the region. He understood the realities of the region, and I think that made them like him a lot. And I think that. I think that the policies that he enacted, majority of Israel supported them, whether it be recognizing Jerusalem, whether it be recognizing
I think Israelis saw it as practical, as something that was in line with facts on the ground.
I think also, and the strong language, he used against, despots or dictators. I think Israelis, appreciate that strong language, and I think even Israelis would like to see that a little more from their leaders.
I'm sure in many things that's true. Yeah, I'm curious though because there are also those, especially in the United States at least, who would argue that Trump was not tough enough on the despots who he needed to be tough on, namely Russia. And of course now we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Well, there are those who obviously those voices are coming from the the Democratic Party and so forth. I think many Republicans were saw Trump as tough on Russia, sanctions and so forth. So obviously he was also tough on North Korea, which brought Kim Jong-un to the table. I think you had the famous when he said, "My button is bigger than your button," in terms of my nuclear, my nuclear weapons are.
But how many nukes do you really need for it to matter at that point?
And I think it's not necessarily a matter of how many. I think it's just a matter of do the dictators take this person seriously and their threats seriously, and I think and from what I was hearing from many Islamic experts on Islam, that when Trump talked about al-Baghdadi that famous press conference after they killed al-Baghdadi, head of ISIS, and that he died like a dog, there was many experts on Islam who said, yeah, the people in the region get that. That's the language they understand. So.
All right. Well, coming back to Israel, we know that Biden and former Prime Minister Netanyahu have actually just met. They shook hands. They shared some very warm words. We missed it on the screen, but they talked about how.
And by the way, they're both politicians. They're
both
politicians. They've both been in politics for more than 40 years. They're good friends. And even though they might have totally different outlooks, they understand the dynamics of politics, and they understand that each country has their interests, and therefore I think that that they have a good relationship, even if they're at opposite ends of what what they believe needs to be done in terms of Iran and the Palestinians. I think there's a story about Biden that he. In some committee where he was angry at one of his fellow committee members, and he had choice words to say to him, and the next day he came back to him and said something like you're right about that. So Biden, he's a personable person, he understands politics. I don't think either of them hold grudges.
Well, and I think that if nothing else, you can absolutely say that Netanyahu is a top-notch expert politician as well. You'd have to be to have been in power for as long as he was.
Not only that, but I think when you look back and you see his successful maneuvering, with also being close, obviously with the United States, but also having close relationship with. Russian President Vladimir Putin. That's not an easy thing. That is not an easy thing. And his ability to have that relationship and to be able to maneuver with a lot of various world leaders.
How do you think his relationship with Putin versus Bennett's relationship with Putin differ? And do you think? How would you rate Prime Minister Bennett's time handling the crisis in Ukraine as opposed to how Netanyahu may have?
Well, I'll comment on the difference in the relationship. I think the difference in the relationship is the depth of the relationship. I think Netanyahu and Putin, for the time that Netanyahu was prime minister, so what was that? 11 years. 11 years. That a lot of time to build a relationship. I think Bennett visited there once, so whatever was accomplished in one visit or whatever was discussed, it's a shallow relationship, as it would be with any world leader. You're not gonna become friends
when you've only met,
and therefore the fact that he went and tried to mediate between Putin and Ukraine, there was a lot of criticism for Bennett, various places in Israel saying, that it's not our place to get in the middle of other people's wars, and I think former Ambassador Ron Dermer said we also need to be very, very careful in how we deal with Putin, because we can't get on his bad side. We have a lot of interest with vis-a-vis Russia, especially the fact that there's
Syria.
Russian forces. Yeah, we do need that freedom, to maneuver our air force and so forth, and we can't have Russia hindering whatever we're trying to do in the Middle East. So obviously there's
Well, and I mean that was made pretty clear, really, by Bennett when he was trying to negotiate and mediate. He made it was talked about quite extensively that was the tightrope that he was walking. That on the one hand you want to be tough on Russia, but on the other hand, we need to maintain an open line of communication with Russia in order to continue operations in Syria, etc.
But the thing with Bennett is that Israel doesn't really have any leverage in terms to mediate. All Israel could be is someone who brings messages from point A to point B, and I don't.
They maintained an objective position, which many say we shouldn't have. Many say that Israel should have taken a side.
At the end of the day, you had Lapid, saying various criticisms of Russia. I think like I said, Israel doesn't have. It's not like Israel, is the United States who can come and say, we will secure this peace agreement. We will guarantee that this happens and that happens, and we can supply these funds and that funds. Bennett didn't really have anything to give except to be someone who can fly from Moscow and say, this is what I heard from. This is what Putin wants to tell you. President of Germany or
Right.
President Zelensky. So I don't think Israel should be. We have enough difficult issues, in our small country, in our region, that to try and mediate between Russia and Ukraine, I think was a mistake.
I mean, so again, though, would that have been a mistake had Netanyahu still been in power as well? Because you talked about how they had a much more established relationship between Netanyahu and Putin.
I think Netanyahu. First of all, I think Netanyahu was someone who also came out and said, it's not our place to get involved in other people's wars.
But it's arguable that he was only saying those things because he was in the opposition. He was trying to embarrass Bennett and make it seem like he was out of his depth.
You could say that. On the other hand, I think Netanyahu would understand that in terms of guaranteeing a peace, or being a mediator that has actual leverage over both countries, he would know well enough that he doesn't have that leverage. So I don't think he would have tried it. I don't. I
mean, leverage maybe not, but maybe not leverage in order to influence one side or the other, but leverage of his relationship in order to be an effective mediator.
Well, like I said, we're talking about countries here. We're not talking about people here. We're not talking about three people who sit around the table and say I'll leverage.
I mean, it has been argued though that Putin is really the driving force behind this invasion. That many of his own top aides advised against it at some point or another.
That could be, but like I said, in terms of Israel, in terms of the Israel coming and getting between Ukraine and Russia and saying we're going to mediate this, and we have the power to. Like I said, they only have the power to relay messages. And there were some people say, well, we should get involved because we're going to get criticism from the West saying you're not doing anything.
Which we did.
Which we did,
yeah.
and that's okay. And part of being a leader, a real leader, is to know that you will receive some criticism, and sometimes there'll be a storm, and you have to weather the storm. That's part. And not for every criticism do you have to capitulate.
Right.
So and it's not like after the mediation happened, Israel received tons of criticism from Zelensky, unwarranted criticism. As he was portraying as if Ukraine had done so much for the Jewish people during the Holocaust, and while I'm sure there are righteous people among Ukrainians who did help Jews. Overall, it was not a very friendly place for Jews during the Holocaust.
Well, so actually, speaking of anti-Semitism and things like that, I think if we bring this conversation back to the Biden visit to Israel, he mentioned, of course, during his speech, which we're seeing clips of that again, he mentioned during his speech fighting against anti-Semitism in the United States. What do you think is being the biggest driver of that? There are some who would argue that it's elements that are being echoed in the Democratic Party.
I think we saw there was an article, I think in the Free Beacon just yesterday or 2 days ago, about one of the members of Congress in the Democratic Party, I think Cori Bush, who from Missouri, I believe, who had some very, very, very close relationship with someone who was very, very anti-Semitic and so forth. So there is parts of the Democratic Party, there is anti-Israel or anti-Semitism. That's there's some of it. There's some of it on
of it on the right as well.
There's some of it on both sides. But I think for the Republican Party, if there is a candidate who sort of expresses those type of things, he will be immediately shunned and removed. I think there was actually a Republican who was considered an anti-Semite who was running, I think, in one of the congressional elections in Chicago, and you had members of the Republican Party, I think Ted Cruz and others, who said don't vote for the Republican. It's don't vote for him. So I don't think you see that same effort. I think you see a lot of tolerance for various anti-Semitic voices. On the left and within the Democratic Party, you don't see that same determination to root it out.
Do you think that Biden's presidency? Do you think that that's really been a priority to address any of that under the Biden White House, or is that just, or is it his interest to, of course, address racism and intolerance in a general view, but not necessarily anti-Semitism?
I would certainly not. I don't think it's been a central thing. I mean, he appointed an envoy, I think Deborah Lipstadt, but Biden's presidency has been expanding government. They've spent a ton of money trying to move forward a green agenda and various other social agendas. So anti-Semitism is not something even at the forefront.
Interesting. All right. So, and then speaking, of course, of the green agenda as well, Biden spoke about expanding technological diplomacy with Israel, but also expanding that diplomacy to the Middle East and then also to India. What do you think the expanse of that is going to be? The extent of that is going to be? Is that going to be just connecting businesses to one another, or is that going to be on a governmental level?
Well, one of the things you have with Israel and the United States is you have various funds or foundations where money goes in from both governments, and they support joint projects between the private sector of Israel and private sector in America, whether it be on agriculture or whether it be in industrial business projects, and science projects. So you have those type of funds, and I think they're also trying to expand that to other topics also. These type of MOUs or aspirations, oftentimes they can be vague, but sometimes it can be to bring people together. Sometimes it can be that the government will spend money, so it's not necessarily clear what the extent of it will be or what they're even talking about.
All right, well, we'll find out much more as soon as we know more from the aftermath of some of these meetings that Biden is going to have. Of course, we will continue to update you as that news comes out. I want to thank you all again so much for joining us. Gideon, thank you, of course, for being with us and for discussing a lot of this and for your insights on this topic. Thank you again. My name is Aaron Porras, and this was ILTV. Join us again for our broadcast later this evening. All right. That's good.
For tens of billions that boosted the economy. Together, empowered, we said yes to peace, not war. Again and again and again and once again. Together we forged a true partnership, a genuine connection.
Shalom, Javier.
Israel and the United States of America. Together for a shared future.
פרסנו פה למעלה מ-1,000 מטר אוהלים, למעלה מ-500 מטר במות, שטיח אדום באורך של כמעט 100 מטר.
president, and it's also he votes all the time, but here he votes each of the president.
United Nations will now vote. The United States, yes?
When you have a true friend, you say yes to them at the right time. You both share the same values, so you choose to go with them time and time again. Together, you have the power to change the world, to march together to attain common goals, to dream and power forward. Together, we turned Israel into a world leader in technology. Together, we entered into trade agreements for tens of billions that boosted the economy. Together, empowered, we said yes to peace, not war. Again and again and again and once again. Together we forged a true partnership, a genuine connection.
Shalom, Javier.
Israel and the United States of America, together for a shared future.
שהדגלים ייכנסו לתמונה יותר. לייק רוצה.
אז תכניסו את הדגלים לתמונה. קרבו טיפה את הדגלים. כל אירוע, לא משנה כמה חשוב באירוע, תמיד תזכרו.
עכשיו, והסטיל זה משמעותי. הבעיה שפה זה פרפקט. פה כבר פחות.
נקודה אחת יותר.
פה...
שים את זה בישר. תתקרבו את הדגלים וזהו.
לא, כי אז כאילו יוצא לו מהראש.
יאללה, אין לו כלום בראש.
בטוח לא. וזה...
הצלמים פה, אז אין פה.
לא, חצי שעה פה. וחסר סטיק. אחר כך יש סלם וידאו. ראש הממשלה סלם סטיק.
אתה נשאר כאן? אתה אומר...
אני מה שאני הבנתי...
לא ללכת לשם ולהביא אותם.
מקבלים אותם פה. מה שאני הבנתי. אבל אני... זה מה שהבנתי. מקבלים...
מה כולם קמים? מה כולם קמים? מלחיצים אותי, הוא בא? כן.
זה של השידור הישיר, של הפול שידור ישיר, הוא העוזר צלם שלוקח את הכבל. הוא כבר שעתיים, נכון, הוא כבר הלך וחזר, אפילו הוא היה לו ציוד קודם, תשאל את מור.
אז את לא רוצה?
אני איתך, כאילו, כאשר אתה ביחד.
לא, אני לא אלך לשם. ניקח אותם, נביא אותם לפה. והם לוחצים פה ידיים, הבנתי. פה. לא, אבל תבוא תצלם כי אני אחר כך מלווה אותם.
אני הולך ככה, אני הולך לפניהם. אני נכנס ראשון, לא רק אני, הוא בכל השאר.
אתם נכנסים איתם לשם?
כן. לפני, אנחנו רצים...
לפני?
זאת אומרת, עושים את הלחיצה ידיים, פאפ.
תראה שאתה לא פותח לי את השידור.
בגלל זה עמדתי בצד שלך.
אי אפשר לעלות אותנו.
זה מה שאני כאן מתאם עם הצלמים. כן, גם. כן, אבל היא לא פה, הם מריצים אותם מפה לשם. כמו מיט. בסדר, אחר כך אני מלווה לך אותם. אני מלווה לך אותם קצת עם הליכה אחורה, ואז אני מכניס לך אותם לפה. פעם נלחיץ, יש עוד זמן. גם שמים אותך בשמש. מגיעים? גם ללכת, אני לא מבין.
שימו לב, יש שידור חי. הם רק נפגשים פה.
מי השידור חי אבל?
שכל הצלמים הולכים כאילו לשם כבר, לגדר. אני צריך ללכת לגדר? בטוח, כי כל הצלמים שם הלכו לגדר. אוקיי.
לא, מגיע.
אבל הם כבר לחצו ידיים בשדה תעופה.
זה יהיה מגע של הצלמים.
מי יכניס את הדבר הזה?
הצלמים לא תחליטו לפניהם, צלמו אותם.
אחי? למה? אהלן, מה קורה? תגידי לו שצריך, בלחיצת יד שקודמת, לפיד היה כזה. לא. לפחות שיעשו את זה על רקע הזה. למה על הרקע הלבן? אני חושב שזה דברים שלא סברו מראש. מראש ועכשיו אין מה לעשות.
לנשיא הזה, הלכו לי המשקפיים.
זה הכל. ואז אתה מזמין אותם לבמה, וזהו, או שראש הממשלה פשוט מתחיל, ואז אחריו אתה אומר, הם יושבים כבר אבל הם כבר יושבים. ראית איפה נכון? אוקיי, כן. אני לא חושבת שאתה צריך להגיד לראש הממשלה שהוא צריך לדבר.
זה של אייפון, זה של...
אולי קרן הג'יוף, זה באנגלית, אולי קרן הג'יוף.
אתה על חצבאות, זז אחי?
זז.
זז?
איך?
לא תרשום לך את זה באנגלית.
סבבה לגמרי, אתה לא יכול...
אתה רוצה לדבר על זה?
גם להכין את זה.
מה?
גם
פשוט בריונים. אבל אני רוצה שתתן לי מישהו להשתחרר עליהם, אבל אתם לא...
והם אחר כך צועקים, שמרו על הסביבה.
הייתי יוצאת
מטיסה חשמלית.
ואז אני קלטתי ובאתי, בואי נשתרים כך, עושים על כל אחד פורטפוליו, ממש התקלטתי ששיברתי והחלטתי שלי ומתקשרו אליהם, קלטתי שלחה לי הודעה של 400 לילד ושלי תקנשו, אבל מה זה התרצות? מה זה וידאו שקיבלתי את זה ושאני רגועה, אתה יודע, אתם קוראים לי זכויות...
זמן הקטנה,
פשוט סימה אותנו בקשר לבעלה. אז אחרי זה היא אמרה לי, הסבירה לי שאנחנו עושים אמרתי לה, הייתי פשוט קובץ של כל העובדים, אמא שלי,
לא, אסור לנו.
הם רוצים לצלם.
זהו, בטוח.
נדבר על זה אחר כך, זה לא דברים שביצעתי שאתה מעבר.
לבריאות של אנשים לא מעריכים.
אמת, אבל לא בזמן. עושה שירים, אבל עושה. הם נכנסים פה לזה. הייתה 4 ימים בשיח. כל זה צריך לפתוח. כן, לא צריך לפתוח עכשיו. לא, הוא כבר הגיע. זה הבעיה שלהם.
הגיע פה איזה רכב בקלקה.
ראש הממשלה הגיע עכשיו.
אנחנו נשמח אם תפנו פה את ה... מי אלימות? אני?
מה זה? מצוין. בסדר גמר.
בסדר, ינק עלינו. סליחה? אתם עומדות להישאר פה?
לא, ממש לא. תפנו את ה... ראית לך מה? מעריין זה... כן, לא, אני אף פעם. למה? לא, ראיתי למה עכשיו, עוד משהו.
הנה, גם הנשיא פה, נראה לי הם... הרצוג היה בשדה תעופה.
אבל לא הוצאות שנכנס...
יאללה, קצה.
יש לך הרבה שמות.
מצוין, אני עשיתי את הבדיקה האחרונה, כבר בסדר, יש עוד משהו שאני רוצה שאני אעשה? אי אפשר לעשות. אתם רוצות להקליט את התוכן פה? דיסק און קי? מהסאונד ישירות מהמיקסר, אם תביאו לי דיסק און קי כלשהו, אני יכול להקליט.
חברים, אתם נכנסים בינתיים?
הוא בא מייצא לשינוי.
לא נכנסים, דני, לא נכנסים. סובי? אתה שלנו,
אנחנו כבר בלייב. אנחנו כבר בלייב.
אתה לייב?
ענבל. ענבל.
בשידור?
כולם בשידור. בבקשה, בואו לצאת. נשיא בבקשה. לפני זה כבר שידור, ואנחנו
אני... קובי.
לא, זה מה שאני רוצה.
אתה לא סאונד, נכון?
קצת מתמתנים.
רגע, אתם עם סאונד,
בטח היה מנכ"ל שלי, ואני פתח.
אתה לא היחידי. לא היחידי. תבין מה הבעיה שלי? אמרו לי בוא נעמוד בצל. לא נכנס.
וגם הרב
לא נכנס, לא נכנסים. לא אמור לשים כיפה.
אני שאני אתרגל.
לשכות, אנא להיכנס לאוהל לזכור בינתיים, תודה.
חמודי, שידור, אין לי כאן.
לא, היה קצר, נכון שידור. אמרו לי לעמוד בצל, אבל אתם עומדים בצל, כמו שאתה שם. ומאלה שמעת את זה. רגע, רואה. רגע, שידור.
התפרסם עכשיו, הציוץ הזה.
זה אומר שהדוברות שלך עוברת.
יש כאן מצלמה בשידור.
אתמול היה פה הקאנצלר האוסטרי. לא תמיד אנחנו נראים ככה עם כל המחנה פליטים.
כן, הנשיא.
אתם בשידור חי.
שומעים טוב את זה שלנו. הייתי איתו בקאנצלר האוסטרי בחמי הריכוז, זה שסבא שלי נספה. הוא אמר לי שהמשפט שנשאר, הוא אמר, אני בשם האוסטרי מתנצל בפני מר לפיד שהרגנו את סבא שלי.
וואו, ככה אמר.
כן, אני אמרתי שם, לא יכולנו לרשום.
אתמול, אחרי הביקור, עשינו, הוא בא ממש ישירת עבודה, הוא השאיר כאן פה יום וחצי.
מה יפה.
והוא דיבר הרבה על הביקור שלך.
בבקשה, רוח, תודה. בואו לפתוח פה. איריס, תפתחו בבקשה את הצלמים. לא, אכפת לי. זהו. מספיק לי. תחתוך.
כשאני מגיע למקומות, מקבלים שונות, עכשיו בארגנטינה, היום,
כתבתי משימה.
יש מים פה? דאוד! תגיד, יש מים, תשיג לי מים. פה אולי יש איזה בקבוק, משהו.
The Honorable Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America, the Honorable Isaac Herzog, President of the State of Israel, the Honorable Yair Lapid, Prime Minister of the State of Israel, the Honorable Antony Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States of America, the Honorable Benny Gantz, Minister of Defense of the State of Israel, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, Chairman of the Yad Vashem Council, Mr. Danny Dayan, Chairman of Yad Vashem, Holocaust survivors, ladies and gentlemen. We have gathered here in the Hall of Remembrance at Yad Vashem, on the Mount of Remembrance, Jerusalem, to commemorate the 6 million Jews murdered by the German Nazis and their collaborators. The Encore Choir, directed by Ms. Daphna Ben Yochanan, will open the ceremony with the song Walk to Caesarea, written by the young poet and parachutist Hannah Senesh, who was killed behind enemy lines in Hungary in 1944.
Sure.
I am honored to invite President Biden to rekindle the eternal flame in the Hall of Remembrance. Identification. As we rekindle the eternal light in this hall of remembrance before the sacred remains of our martyrs, we unite with the blessed memory of 6 million of our people who died a martyr's death at the hands of the German Nazis and their collaborators, of the Jewish communities destroyed in a wicked attempt to eradicate the name and culture of Israel. We remember with veneration the fortitude of the fighters who kindled the sublime flame of rebellion among the besieged masses of the ghettos, the heroic and persistent struggle of the masses of the house of Israel on the threshold of destruction for their human dignity and their Jewish heritage. We remember the righteous among the nations who risked their lives to save Jews from persecution and death. I am honored to invite President Biden to lay the wreath on the slab under which the ashes of Holocaust victims from the extermination camps are buried. Cantor Shmuel Berlad will now recite El Maleh Rachamim, a prayer for the souls of the martyrs.
דיין אלמנות ואבי יתומים המצי מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר רקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמות 6 המיליונים אחינו ואחיותינו רבבות אלפי ישראל אנשים, נשים וטף שנהרגו, שנחנקו שנשרפו, שנקברו חיים, ושהומתו בכל מיני מיתות משונות ואכזריות בידי הגרמנים, הנאצים ועוזריהם, ושהלכו לעולמם על קידוש השם בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony is concluded. President Biden will now greet Holocaust survivors Dr. Giselle Gita Sikowitz and Mrs. Rena Quint. Please remain in your places.
After I had come, I've been speaking. But one night, So surprised that the benefit appreciation of beautifulness and respect in our beautifulness country.
Anybody who comes to do my
Yes.
When I was married as a young man, I just got like to
Where do you live?
I live on I'm going to tell her.
Yes, tell her and she knows how. Oh, they're beautiful women. If you invite me to the president's home, we'd love to host. I'm hosting a long holiday. How old are you?
I'm now 86. When I was in Berlin.
I just want you to know, in the Biden family, no woman is as old as any man.
No man,
no woman is as old as any man in the family.
Okay, formally. But in fact, they are much younger.
That's exactly right.
You know, Mr. President, I was afraid that since your wife is not here, you will fall in love with those ladies.
I have. You know it.
No, but what I said,
I know them. I already fell in love with them, so I will.
what I said to him is that I love seeing Dr. Joe holding hands is always
As I told you, everybody knows I love my wife more than she loves me. I had to ask
why didn't she come?
That's another event.
She had to go to Texas.
That's another event. She'll help the new president.
President. I was mentioned at the concert that you will want to speak to me about. And it was so moving because the most emotional word in my vocabulary is the word home. and what it means to me. And what it means to me is a place where every child receives the warmth that he needs in order to grow up. And it connects at the same time to the home when we were away in an house, when we were alone, abandoned. It used in every kind of way. And it also connects to our Shabbat, to our holy Sabbath, which is a place where we can be together and recite our blessings and giving thanks to God that He created a country like this where we know no more enemies going to destroy us. Because this is the place where there is the little boy who's growing up knowing that he will protect every person, every Jewish person from being so abused.
And because we have people like Mr. Gunn and Mr. Lucky.
Yeah, of course. That goes with it.
Right?
Okay, the president has to.
Nice to meet you. We're not ignoring you.
I'm saying
The president has to roll.
Who are you?
I'm the president.
The president of Israel, President Herzog.
Oh, of course. You're my neighbor.
I know you're a neighbor. And I said I'm going to visit you both.
Yeah.
And it's all right.
But Greer wrote about us today, and he wrote about Rabbi Lau. Share news about
יש לנו משהו.
להונגרים יש. להונגרים.
Okay, we are keeping you much longer than you're supposed to be.
My mother would say, God love you, dear.
You too, absolutely.
By the way, she wasn't Jewish, but she was Irish.
So I will be happy. We get from Greer.
Just remember, if you remember my name,
Of course I remember you.
tell her that she wrote about us today. Rabbi Lau. Greer wrote about the two of us today.
Is Yankee Quint a relative of yours? Yaakov Quint?
Yossi Quint is my grandson.
My sunglasses are on.
My late stepfather was from Dallas.
My badge fell out.
My father, I saw you from the age of the United States.
What was his name?
When he came here, I said,
That was the name. Thank you. I'll take you up on that.
Yes, please.
much longer than these.
Did you take pictures of it? Of course, I can show
They said he wouldn't touch us, but they sat. He bent down to us, and he was holding our hands. Did you see that?
The what? I'm sorry, what?
They told us we shouldn't touch him.
Yeah.
He was holding our hands.
What to us? They didn't tell us. They wrote in the Jerusalem Post this morning.
Can we go? Can we go? Can we go?
Sorry, now. 1 second right now.
Kind of anything. Your honor, you got it.
Yes. Yes.
You cannot understand this without understanding the impact of the whole system. Those who just takes the definition of the proof.
אתה השקעה חי בסדר. זה גועל נפש. מדהים פשוט.
חבר'ה, שומעים אתכם.
כן, כן. אני לא יודע מי אתם מאיפה באת, אבל וואלה, בטח הם מתנהגים.
I don't know the same thing to government.
There's another uniqueness to Delaware. There's another uniqueness from this one. Delaware, I think, is the only country who scored the
That's the only state. The only state.
I also think that to
חיים!
taking all this time. Thank you. Thank you. Going that way? Yes, sir.
זהו אפשר?
קיבלת את התמונה?
יכולה לחתוך ממנו. תקשיב, למה אין כאן כלום חוץ מזה?
תראה אם היה...